Mike had always dreamed of owning his own business. From a young age, he admired entrepreneurs and imagined what it would be like to have his own company. Born into a middle-class family, Mike learned early on the value of hard work. His parents, both teachers, always encouraged him to pursue his goals, but also taught him the importance of financial responsibility. At 30, Mike already had a stable career as a sales manager in a mid-sized company. He was known for his dedication and efficiency, always arriving early and leaving the office late. His colleagues respected him, and his superiors saw him as a promising employee. However, despite his apparent success, Mike felt that something was missing. The desire to become an entrepreneur remained latent, waiting for the right moment to blossom. Bruno, on the other hand, was the opposite of Mike in many ways. Outgoing and easygoing, he had always been the life of the party since school days. While Mike was dedicated to his studies, Bruno preferred to enjoy life to the fullest. However, behind his carefree personality, Bruno had a generous heart and a keen business acumen. The two met in high school and, despite their differences, became great friends. Bruno admired Mike's determination, and Mike appreciated the way Bruno could see the positive side of any situation. Over the years, even as they followed different paths, they remained in touch, always willing to help each other when needed. Mike's life changed drastically when, at the age of 35, he was caught off guard by a restructuring at the company where he worked. Suddenly, the dedicated manager found himself unemployed, with bills to pay and an uncertain future ahead. The initial shock was intense, but Mike wasn't the type to give up easily. Instead of despairing, he saw that situation as the opportunity he had been waiting for to fulfill his dream. After weeks of research and planning, Mike decided he would start a commercial cleaning company. He had identified a growing demand in the market and believed that with his experience in management and sales, he could build a successful business. The only problem was the startup capital. Mike's savings weren't enough to cover all the costs of opening and operating the company. It was at this moment that Bruno stepped in. During a lunch where Mike shared his plans, Bruno was impressed by his friend's enthusiasm and vision. Without hesitation, he offered, "Mike, I believe in your potential. How about I become an investor in this project?" Mike was surprised by the offer. Bruno's confidence in him and his idea was exactly the boost he needed. The two spent the following weeks discussing details, drafting contracts, and finalizing the business plan. With Bruno's investment, Mike was able to rent a small office, purchase the necessary equipment, and hire his first employees. The first few months were challenging but also exciting. Mike worked tirelessly, dealing with clients, training the team, and handling administrative tasks. His dedication began to pay off, and the company started to gain a reputation in the region. Bruno, although not involved in the day-to-day operations, always kept himself informed and offered valuable advice. The small cleaning company grew steadily. Mike expanded the services, hired more employees, and even began to consider opening a branch in a neighboring city. The initial success seemed to confirm that he had made the right choice in pursuing his entrepreneurial dream. However, fate had other plans. When the pandemic hit the country, the impact on businesses was immediate and devastating. Many companies closed or drastically reduced their operations, which meant an abrupt drop in demand for commercial cleaning services. Mike found himself in a desperate situation, with bills piling up and employees depending on him. Trying to adapt to the new reality, Mike made some hasty decisions. He invested in new equipment, hoping to attract clients with disinfection services, but the demand was not enough to cover the costs. He also tried to diversify into residential cleaning, but the competition in this sector was very fierce. Debts began to accumulate rapidly. Mike could no longer pay suppliers on time, and employee salaries were always delayed. Worst of all, he had no way to repay Bruno's investment, who had trusted him from the beginning. The situation was becoming unsustainable. Mike could hardly sleep at night, worried about the future of the company and the consequences of a possible failure. He knew he needed help, but he was ashamed to admit his mistakes, especially to Bruno. Finally, gathering all his courage, Mike decided to seek out Bruno. The meeting was set in a quiet cafe. When Bruno arrived, Mike could barely look at him. With a trembling voice, he began, "Bruno, I know I owe you a lot, but please, give me some time. I promise I will reorganize the company and pay you back every last cent." Mike expected to see disappointment or anger in Bruno's eyes, but what he found was understanding. Bruno listened attentively as Mike explained the company's situation, the challenges faced, and the mistakes made. When Mike finished, feeling completely exposed and vulnerable, Bruno did something that surprised him deeply. "Forget about that debt, Mike. I believe in you. Use this to start over." Bruno's words hit Mike like a bolt of hope amidst the storm. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Bruno was not only giving him more time, but completely forgiving the debt. His friend's generosity left him speechless. "But Bruno, it's a lot of money. Are you sure?" "I am, Mike. I invested in you, not just in the company. I know you're going to turn things around. Just promise that you'll learn from this experience and do things differently moving forward." Mike left that meeting with a mix of relief, gratitude, and determination. He promised himself he would not waste this second chance. In the days that followed, Mike dedicated himself to restructuring the company, cutting unnecessary costs, renegotiating contracts with suppliers, and seeking new business opportunities. However, the universe seemed to want to test the lesson Mike had learned. A few days after his conversation with Bruno, he found himself in a situation that would test his values and compassion. Uncle Winston was a simple, hard-working man who always held a special place in Mike's heart. Winston, Mike's father's younger brother, never had much in life but was always willing to help others. Years ago, when Mike was still employed, Winston had asked for a small loan to cover some medical expenses. At the time, Mike did not hesitate to help, knowing how trustworthy his uncle was. Now, at almost 70 years old, Winston lived modestly on his pension. The meeting between uncle and nephew happened by chance in front of the neighborhood grocery store. Mike, still focused on reorganizing his finances, saw in that moment an opportunity to recover some money. "Uncle Winston, it's high time you paid me back that money," said Mike, crossing his arms in a defensive posture. Winston, surprised by his nephew's direct approach, responded with humility. "Mike, I know I owe you, but I'm going through a tough time. The retirement barely covers the medicine. Just give me a little more time." The expression on Winston's face was one of genuine concern. His hands, marked by years of hard work, trembled slightly as he held an almost empty shopping bag. Mike could see the weariness in his uncle's eyes, but at that moment, all he could think about was his own financial situation. "Uncle, I understand that things are tough, but this loan has been overdue for a long time. I need that money now." Winston tried to explain his situation, mentioning the rising costs of medications and the bills he could barely afford. But Mike, blinded by his own need, was not willing to listen. "If you can't pay me now, I'll have to take legal action. I can't wait any longer." The words came out of Mike's mouth before he could think about the consequences. The shock on Winston's face was immediate. The elderly man, who had always considered Mike a dear nephew, could not believe what he was hearing. "Mike, please, don't do this. You know I've always been honest, I just need a little more time." But Mike was adamant. He said a cold goodbye to his uncle, leaving him there, stunned and hurt. As he walked away, Mike tried to justify his attitude to himself, saying it was just business, that he needed to be firm to regain his financial life. What Mike didn't know was that his conversation with Uncle Winston had not gone unnoticed. His cousin Elisa, Winston's daughter, was arriving at the small market at the moment of the discussion and heard everything. Shocked by her cousin's attitude, she immediately called other family members to report what had happened. The news spread quickly among the relatives. Many were outraged by Mike's attitude, especially considering everything Winston had done for him over the years. The uncle had always been present at important moments in Mike's life, offering emotional support and, often, financial help when he could. The story eventually reached Bruno's ears. Initially, he didn't want to believe it. The Mike he knew wouldn't act that way, especially with an elderly relative who was going through difficulties. Bruno decided he needed to see Mike in person to understand what was happening. The next day, Bruno showed up unannounced at Mike's office. As soon as he entered, Mike noticed something was wrong. The expression on Bruno's face was a mix of disappointment and contained anger. "Mike, we need to talk," Bruno said, his voice serious. Mike, confused, invited Bruno to enter his private office. As soon as the door closed, Bruno got straight to the point. "Is it true what I'm hearing about you and your Uncle Winston?" Mike's heart sank. He knew exactly what Bruno was talking about, but he didn't expect the news to reach his friend's ears so quickly. "Bruno, I can explain." But Bruno interrupted him. "Mike, how can you be so harsh with your own uncle for so little after everything I've done for you? I forgave an infinitely larger debt because I believed in you, and now you can't show a little compassion." Bruno's words hit Mike like a punch in the stomach. Suddenly, all the justification he had built in his mind for his actions crumbled. He found himself confronted not only with his friend's disappointment but with the reality of his own actions. I don't know what to say, Bruno. I was so focused on recovering my financial situation that I lost perspective." Bruno shook his head, still incredulous. "Mike, when I forgave your debt, it wasn't just an act of generosity. It was because I believed you were a person of character, someone who would understand the value of that gesture and pay it forward. I see I was mistaken." Bruno's words weighed on Mike like a ton of bricks. For the first time, he truly saw his actions in a new light. Shame and regret flooded over him. "Bruno, you're right. I've acted terribly. I don't know what got into me." Bruno sighed, his initial anger giving way to deep disappointment. "Mike, it's not me you owe an explanation to. It's your Uncle Winston and your family. They are the people you truly hurt with your actions." Mike nodded, feeling the weight of his actions. He knew Bruno was right. It wasn't just a matter of money. It was about respect, compassion, and the values he always claimed to have. "What do I do now, Bruno?" "You know what you need to do, Mike. Go to your uncle, apologize and offer help. Show him and his family that you are still the person they knew and loved." With those words, Bruno got up to leave. Before opening the door, he turned one last time to Mike. "Remember, Mike, the true measure of a man is not how much money he has in the bank, but how he treats those who can offer him nothing in return." After Bruno left, Mike sat in his chair for a long time, reflecting on everything that had happened. Bruno's words echoed in his mind, mingling with the memories of his Uncle Winston's hurt face. With a heavy heart, Mike drove to his Uncle Winston's modest house. Standing in front of the door, he hesitated for a moment, gathering the courage to ring the bell. When Winston answered, surprise and a hint of apprehension were visible on his face. "Uncle Winston, forgive me. I was wrong. I shouldn't have treated you that way. If you need anything, I'm here to help." The words burst out of Mike in a rush, laden with emotion and sincere regret. Winston, initially cautious, saw the genuine contrition in his nephew's eyes. "Mike, my son, come in. Let's talk." Sitting in the simple but cozy living room, uncle and nephew had a long conversation. Mike opened his heart, explaining the pressures he was facing, but acknowledging that this did not justify his behavior. Winston, with the wisdom that only years can bring, listened patiently. "Mike, we all make mistakes. The important thing is to recognize them and learn from them. I'm proud of you for coming here." The kind words of Winston deeply touched Mike. He realized that there was much more to learn from his uncle than he had ever imagined. "Uncle, please let me help you now. I don't just want to forgive your debt, but I want to do more. How can I assist with your medications and expenses?" Winston smiled, his eyes shining with withheld tears. "Your presence and your remorse are already help enough, Mike. But if you insist, we can think of something together." In the days that followed, Mike dedicated himself not only to helping his uncle, but also to reconnecting with his entire family. He organized a family lunch where he publicly apologized and committed to becoming a better person. The lesson Mike learned on that journey echoed in all aspects of his life. The forgiveness he received from Bruno and his uncle Winston not only saved him from an even bigger mistake, but also taught him that generosity is a transformative force. More than restructuring his business, Mike decided to restructure his own life, prioritizing respect and empathy for those around him. He realized that a simple act of kindness can change the course of a life, and that true success is measured not by what we receive, but by what we are capable of giving. And above all, he understood that it is never too late to do the right thing, provided we are humble enough to acknowledge our mistakes and brave enough to correct them. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.